Good morning. It's really a pleasure to be here in Taiwan again. I have to say that I was in this very room a little over 2 years, not quite 2 years ago, on my first trip to Taiwan with Dr. Mokli Rosen, a founder of Spark from Stanford, at the first International Spark Conference. So it's great to be back. And I'm also very pleased to welcome my colleague from Stanford, Kathy Koo. Kathy's trained in chemical engineering and has worked in biotech, as well as spending quite a number of years now at Stanford. She has been the director of our Office of Technology Licensing for the past 26 years. She will tell you about the responsibilities of OTL and how we work to do the technology transfer from Stanford investigators to biotech and all other industries. So I welcome Kathy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, President, Minister Chen, President Wang. I am delighted to be here. 我是中国人，我可以讲一点不太好，所以我很高兴来， and 很感谢你们invite me. I'm going to talk about Stanford's process in licensing. I do want to start with saying that in 1994, we had a very rigorous discussion for over a year to talk about Stanford's conflict of interest policy. And originally, before 1994, there was just one sentence in our faculty handbook that said, if you think you have a conflict, then talk to somebody. And that seemed not adequate. So we had a very robust discussion among the faculty senate and came up with a very strong conflict of commitment and conflict of interest policy, which you can find on our website. And we have been implementing that since 1994. It has worked really well. What I wanted to say, though, is that, again, licensing a startup company is not very different than licensing an existing company. So what I'm going to do is talk about what we do for licensing in general and then point out the specific changes that we deal with when we're licensing a startup company. So this is our usual process. A disclosure comes in, I assign it to a licensing associate, and sometimes at that time when we meet with the inventor might say they're interested in a startup company. Sometimes they don't know that they're interested. The famous Google story is that the Google founders, Sergey Brin, Larry Page, had no intention of starting a company when they disclosed their invention to us. But they were very frustrated because nobody in industry recognized the value of their search engine. And so because nobody recognized the value, they decided to start a company. So sometimes the inventors don't realize at the beginning, but they may decide over time. Sometimes they know very early on that they think this is a hot technology and they want to start a company around it. So even if they tell us they want to start a company, our licensing person evaluates the technology to see if we think it's licensable. Is industry willing to take a license for this? And if so, does there need to be intellectual property, IP protection? Sometimes it is going to be a copyright, sometimes it's going to be materials mostly that is valuable. It's not always intellectual property. And then what do we do with every single invention, startup or not? We market the technology. This actually is quite key to mitigating conflict of interest if we have to have a review later on because we want to license a startup. So at Stanford, we believe that we should make our technologies broadly available to all industries who might be interested. So we have a very easy system to market the technology, often through our website. That's a little bit of passive marketing. We have a very sophisticated database. We prepare an abstract to discuss what the advantages and benefits of our technologies might be. Then we will make the abstract available by releasing it to the website. We have a website called Tech Finder. Any of you could go to it and look for any of the technologies that are available for licensing at Stanford. So we feel we have an obligation to all of industry to at least share the potential ability for a company to license that technology. Sometimes when we know an inventor wants to start a company, we might have a shorter deadline. It might be 4 weeks rather than 3 months. But in general, we believe in the concept, the philosophy of always making it known. We have a database of contacts. It's a huge database with company contacts, with their keywords, so that we know what industries might be interested in certain technologies. Each one of you can go into our Tech Finder and create your own profile and say that you're very interested in high tech, sensors, biomaterials, et cetera, so you can keyword yourself. And when there's a new invention that's available for licensing in your area, you will get a push email for that technology. Now, the reality is we hope they're responses. Most of the time when we send out 200 or 300 technology pushes, nobody responds. It's too early, generally. Industry is not ready to take on something so early at that technology readiness level of 1. So again, rarely do we get any responses. We really would like responses. We'd like companies to say, this is too early, this does not work with our manufacturing, we are not going to change our whole system for this new technology. Any feedback is very valuable. Okay. So, if we're so lucky to have a response, then how do we know which licensee to pick? The reality is we don't usually have someone to pick. If we're lucky, there's usually only one interested party. But if there were, we would decide by the passion of the champion, because on the other side, the receiving side of industry, there needs to be a champion who's going to help bring this technology into the company and move it forward. We also want a realistic development plan. The development plan tells us what the company envisions, how long it's going to take them to bring a product to the marketplace. And it needs to be realistic, because many existing companies take too long. They want to have a lot of leeway. And some startup companies are a little bit unrealistic, and it's often they think it's faster than it really turns out to be. The other thing we want to assess is the ability to commercialize that invention. Do they have resources, and do they have experience? Now, this is a very tricky area, because an existing company will have lots of resources and probably have lots of experience. A startup doesn't have as many resources, and they don't have as much experience, but they have the passion. And that fire in the belly that we call is very, very important. You need the passion to know that even if one experiment or one development path slows down or you run into hurdles, that you still want to and believe in that technology and want to bring it forward. That passion sometimes is more important than the resources and the experience. So as I said, most times we don't have a choice. But let's just assume we have a choice. Each company has given us a development plan, and we've decided that the startup is the one that we're interested in. So we would only choose them based on those factors. Their business plan has to be as strong as an existing company's business plan. So typically, the terms of a startup are very, very much like an ordinary license agreement. It generally includes equity, but it's not required. It's not that we have to have equity in a startup. And I'll be talking about that later. Usually at Stanford, we say we would take 5% or less for almost a perfect deal. In fact, our policy limits the maximum to about 10%. We don't really want to influence the direction of the company. We don't take a board seat. We don't vote our shares. And basically, we try to get a non-dilution clause up to a certain amount of financing. But it also, that amount is negotiable. It depends on the industry. It depends on the level of financing that will take to move this product forward. And then we have in our clause a buy more clause. And this I'll explain just a little bit, and it's sort of unique to Stanford. The president and the board of trustees was worried that in the boom years, in the very hot years of venture capital, that we were not able to invest in startups as readily as we'd like to be, because many of these funds were filled up. And so what they did was pass a resolution that we would require Stanford to be able to buy more, put in actual money for equity in future rounds. So this is actual cash. In a license agreement, the equity is partial consideration for the license. This buy more clause is actual Stanford cash that we put into the company. And it's sort of an anti-dilution provision. We should be able to invest at least 10% of the round to keep our prorated share of equity. Most universities do not require this. Most universities do not have funds to invest in the startup. So again, Stanford is a little bit unique in that. But other terms of a license are very, very similar. We really care about diligence for a startup and for an existing company. Oops. We want milestone payments. We want patent reimbursement. We want earned royalties. We want minimum annual payments. So we don't treat a startup license particularly different from an existing company's license. So I wanted to talk about these different categories of startups. There are startups where there's no financial interest by Stanford or the inventors, i.e. we don't take equity. There are startups with Stanford taking equity, but the inventors don't have a financial interest. And then there are startups where Stanford is taking equity and there is financial interest by the inventors, which could be students, staff, or faculty. So how can this happen? Sometimes there's no financial interest via equity in this startup. Typically, this would happen when the company refuses to give us equity. Sometimes the inventors don't want to have equity in the startup. For some reason, they might have a conflicting consulting arrangement. And then sometimes the inventors have left Stanford. The company doesn't want to give us equity. The inventors are not conflicted from our standpoint. And so we have done startups where we don't have any financial interest at all. It'd just be a regular license. Sometimes there are startups where we take equity, but the inventors are not really involved in the company. Maybe they're too busy, maybe they're not, maybe they don't necessarily believe that this is a technology that deserves their time and effort to develop. We would still do an arm's length negotiation. And equity, as always, is just partial consideration. We never just do an equity-only license. We always require cash. It's got typical financial terms and the buy more clause. This is less common because usually the inventors have an interest. This one is sort of interesting because if the financial conflict of interest is through students and we expect the students to graduate, then we would not necessarily do a conflict of interest review on this. If they're no longer at Stanford, it doesn't become a conflicted situation. So, in a startup where our inventors are involved, and typically we do worry the most about faculty. Faculty are often a founder. They are a scientific advisory board member. They are a consultant. Typically, they have some arrangement with the company where they have a financial interest in that company. Our rules are that the faculty must not have a management role at the company. They cannot have the title of Chief Scientific Officer, Chief IT management person. Is this too? Sorry, this is better. The faculty can take a leave of absence. Many of them do. They're allowed to take a leave of absence for 1 year, and they can ask for a second year, but usually after the second year, they have to choose. They have to come back or they will stay at the company. When they take a leave of absence, it's really a leave. It's not a sabbatical. So they have their allegiance to the company when they take a leave, and they don't have any requirements for Stanford. We also have a rule that the faculty must not negotiate with OTL. The faculty have two hats in that case. They're the inventor, and we typically ask them for input, which doesn't work when they're conflicted, and they also have a role in the company. And again, it's very, very typical that when a faculty wants to start a company, they want us to give an easy deal to the company and be nicer to the company. We have a lot of experience that even if faculty starts a company, very often the faculty and the company part ways eventually. So the faculty has to negotiate an arm's length license, as we do with any other company. We don't give more favorable terms to the faculty startup. And again, as I said, we're often very sure that the faculty and the company will separate ways, and that's perfectly okay. The company is developing technology. The faculty sort of loses interest in the whole development process, and they want to go back to research. So again, sometimes, eventually when the faculty comes back to the university or is less conflicted, they are very impatient with the company, and they say the company is not moving fast enough, they're not developing it fast and trying hard enough. So again, sometimes this parting of the way is less smooth than other times. When there's a faculty startup, we always do a conflict of interest review. The conflict of interest review has to come before we sign the agreement. So we have to get approval before we can sign the agreement. If we don't get approval, we will not sign the agreement. That takes precedent to any financial gain. So the process is that the conflict of interest is reviewed by the school dean or their designate. So we're a very school-based university. We have 7 schools, and at the dean's level, there's always one person who is in charge of conflict of interest. That person would review their faculty's conflict of interest form and information. Then it goes up to the Dean of Research, who is the central dean for research. So it's really 2 levels of review. We don't have committees in general. This is actually a very fast review. I will go into more details in the afternoon, the actual process. But again, it's 2 levels. It's usually by the person. If the dean's level agrees, and maybe the dean of research level is not sure, they will go back and forth, talk to each other, and decide how best to handle this. In the process, OTL, my office, has to submit a conflict of interest reason for why we choose this licensee. And then the inventor also has to submit a conflict of interest discussion about their conflicts, what they plan to do about separating the research. We talk about what we've done with marketing and why we've chosen that licensee. So we describe our marketing efforts. Again, typically we sent a mailing to several companies. None of them expressed interest. Or we could say some of them have expressed interest, but then they went away, or they expressed interest and didn't provide a good development plan for us. We have to describe what we did and why we chose the particular licensee. And then we will generally describe the terms of the license, but it will not be financial. I mean, it won't be very much detail in finance, because we don't want the conflict of interest people to say, oh, for a $50 million deal, we'll look the other way. So they don't generally have a sense of how much this tech transfer license is worth. What the inventor has to do is describe their financial relationship with the company. They describe, is their relationship a consulting one? Are they going to be on the scientific advisory board, board of directors? And they must describe, this is very, very important, how they're going to separate their research at Stanford from what's going on at the company. This is very important because we need to make sure that what they do at Stanford is for Stanford's benefit. What they do at the company will be for the company's benefit. We also have a policy that Stanford's resources should not be used for personal gain. So in that policy, it clearly designates that you have to separate your interests. And so equally as important is how are you going to make sure that your students are getting the best education they can. They should not be involved in the faculty company's activities. They can't be the boss of a student inside the university and outside the university. That would be a very big conflict of interest. Many times the conflict of interest group suggests that the faculty discuss their relationship with the company with their whole lab so that it's very transparent. Basically, our system is such that we encourage disclosure and openness. So we negotiate the license. We submit our rationale about why we're choosing the faculty startup. The faculty submits the conflict of interest review. The school dean reviews it, and then the Dean of Research is the last one to say okay, and then we can sign the agreement. The School of Medicine has a little bit more extensive review on complicated cases. The School of Medicine deals with human subjects research, clinical trials, and we very much want to make sure that all of our conflicts are handled well with respect to human subjects research. So straightforward conflict of interest reviews are handled by our manager, conflict of interest, and they can just say, yes, this is fine. If the review requires further review, then the School of Medicine Conflict of Interest Review Committee will review. That doesn't happen very often. It's, most of our cases are pretty straightforward at the research level. And even when there's clinical trials, we're able to handle it. The faculty who is inventing cannot be the protocol director of a clinical trial. So again, they are not involved. Now in the other schools, we have a School of Engineering, we have School of Humanities and Sciences, where the biology, chemistry, and physics reside. And we also have a lot of centers where it's interdisciplinary research. That the designee is the Dean of Research. So again, we have these other schools who will independently review. The School of Medicine review does not affect School of Engineering, etc. So our general philosophy is that it's management of conflict of interest rather than prohibition. We train the laboratory personnel and the faculty. Sometimes the conflict of interest review program person will go to the lab, talk to the lab. They definitely talk to the faculty about, again, how to separate their research internal from the company's research. If there's too great a conflict for a student, we will ask another faculty to be available to the student to be able to talk to the student about concerns. So again, that student-faculty relationship is very precious, it's sacrosanct, and we want the students to be able to feel they have an outlet to talk to someone else besides the potentially conflicted faculty. In both cases, they must separate the work and separate the education of the student. So our observations are that we do license a lot of startups. Last year, it was 30-some in 1 year. I feel that we do have a strong, robust conflict of interest policy and process. It's not very bureaucratic. It happens quite quickly. The conflict of interest review can be 1 or 2 days, and often we get an answer right away. Actually, what usually holds it up is the faculty hasn't met with the conflict of interest person, and it's more the faculty being slow than our side being slow. And then the conflict of interest review does not inhibit startup activity. As you might guess, there's some faculty who feel like the conflict of interest review slows things up. It doesn't have to. I think it depends always on the situation. If it's a very conflicted situation, there might be more discussion around it. But if it's a straightforward conflict of interest situation, we know that conflicts happen. As the conflict of interest program manager says, if there's no conflict, there's no interest. So we know this is going to happen. We manage it. We really believe in transparency. Full disclosure by all the parties really protects the faculty from future accusations that things weren't handled properly. It protects the university because we have obligations to the federal funding agencies to do a thorough and good faith conflict of interest review. So that's all. I would love to answer questions if you have any.
Thank you, Sherry, for such a very nice presentation. I have a question. If a professor is on the absence of leave and serves as like a consultant to the company which licenses his technology, can this professor still be the advisor to his graduate students at school during that absence of leave?
Yes, they can, but they have to separate the work. Typically, when a faculty wants to take a leave of absence, they will want a line management role in the company. So those titles that we prohibit, they will probably want to run the R&D or run some sector of the company. They can still advise the students, but again, that's with the assumption that the student work is separated from the company.
Okay, then from the company side, if I were the company's person, I would very much like to have a very good graduate students trained by this professor in the future coming to my company to continue to work on the technology from this professor. Because, like you described, the professor may go back to the school a year later, maximum maybe 2 years. So is there any like flexibility in the policy that you just mentioned that there should be very clear cut? Did you have this kind of situation before, and how did you handle it?
We generally say that the students have to have graduated, or let's say they quit or something. But they can't be on both sides. I mean, that would be a very dangerous situation for the student to have the faculty boss at Stanford and the faculty boss at the company. The student is stuck. Yeah. So, no, we don't generally want the student at all to be involved in the faculty company. I understand from a company side where you would want the student to be involved. Hopefully that student graduates and is interested in consulting or working for the company in the future date.
Okay, thank you.
是这样的啊，因为我们非常的遗憾哦，台湾最近发生的很大的事情就是这个翁启惠院长的这个事件啊，包含过去也发生过这个陈环崇院士的事件。我们希望就是陈部长这边科技基准法的这个修法的速度以及幅度还要再加速哦，因为我们觉得很可惜，就是说台湾一个这么小的地方然后刚刚部长也提到我们的虽然有一些创新能量不错，但是我们确实需要 海外优秀的人才回来，而在海外优秀人才回来的时候，他们同时也是创作人。那他们创作人，尤其像我们生医产业的一个带动，这些研发的能量不是要锁在学校，这些研发的能量是确实是不是只有技转，还要商品化出去，是要让整个产业带动，要赚钱的。那今天这些人他以创作人身份，涉及到可能快要赚钱，可是确实他们也还没赚钱，不管是张念慈院长或翁启惠院长，他们的股票还没有卖啊。那我今天也跟浩鼎完全没有关系。但是意思是说，这个未来还会发生，或者也不会再发生了，因为没有海外优秀的人才要回来了。那我们希望有海外最优秀的人才回来的一个同时，是不是这个产学制度，包含刚刚提到的这个 conflict of interest， 人家 Stanford 可以做到这么样的清楚，哪边是学校的，哪边是公司的，那哪边是中研院的，哪边是这个产业的。那产业确实要带动要发展，那我们不能在大学跟中研院做 research 以后全部锁住了，你全部不让他出去，对，然后可能人家快要赚钱的时候，全部这个我也不晓得台湾的名嘴到底懂不懂，全部把它打烂了。那我们真的觉得非常遗憾跟可惜。那我们很高兴部长在修改这个科技基本法基础法，可是可不可以这个东西产学制度让它出来，让未来真的大学跟这个中研院的这研发能量，不是在这边报告 paper 的数量跟专利的数量，是我们台湾的不管是什么生意产业或者什么产业，真正的带动跟起飞了啊！谢谢。
Sorry, Katharine. 我刚刚才说，就是说科技基本法我们已经修改，那也才刚党团协商过，现在在等3读哈。那在3读过程里面，那只是母法开放，那后续有一些执法的部分，就包括刚刚提到这个 disclosure。那我刚才讲说，这个 Stanford is our model， 说我们那时候在做母法的执法的修订跟母法的时候，就是 follow Stanford 这样的一个 disclosure， 包括它的 committee、它的 review 的机制。那当然，今天我听得更清楚了哈。那我回去还是会再看一遍。不过那个执法全部都已经 ready， 等着那个3读通过就 announce。那所以你刚刚所提的问题就是我们想解决的啦。所以那我们希望是把全套这样的方式，希望去检视。尤其刚刚一直在强调，就是说那个利益的回避跟揭露，以前这个地方做得非常不清楚，所以也让翁院长踩到这个红线。那这个就是当时一接任蔡总统也一直期待说，我们就是要把这个线画得清楚。所以将来这个母法在3读通过以后，所有的各部会的法令。科技部都已经找各部会来谈过，我们牵涉其实有将近10个部会，10几个法令，全部都已经改好了。现在就等着说3读通过，我们全部会release出来，就是基本上就照今天讲的这个精神在走了哈。
Thanks for the very detailed and very important description of the Stanford LTL. I actually just came back from Stanford for a long time, so. It was really a great system. So I noticed that one thing that, oh, by the way, I'm Jensen from the National Taiwan University. I'm the current director for the Drug Research Center. So my concern is still at the biotech range. So one of the big things that I see the differences between the Stanford and the NTU, probably the most realistic one is NTU doesn't pay for any of the patent application submission or maintenance fee. We had to deal that with ourselves. So, for example, we have a project it looks really promising right now, but we are entering the national phase for multiple countries. So all our PIs had to think really hard, like maybe get a second mortgage of a house, wow. Just to pay the almost like close to $2 million. Wow. So that's a huge burden for the PIs. But we were at the stage that either we have to abandon the patent or we have to go for it. So I'm not sure how much Stanford will sponsor the patent. Maybe you can elaborate that a little bit, because once you enter the national phase, that's a huge amount of money, especially for biotech. maybe not for the device, but for new drug development, that's a huge amount of money. So one of the things is like that. And then, so we felt that whenever we talk to the university or talk to either the company, either the VCs would try to fund us or the OTL at the university, I think for both of them, it's a shocking news that we had to pay out of our own pocket. So the VCs had to think really hard how they can try to get that money back to us because we really pay for that. And I think one of our PI, not from the NTU, but I think she actually get a second mortgage for her house to pay for it. I know for our university, it's probably pretty hard for the NTU to pay for all the patent applications because that's a huge money, too. So I would like to know a little bit more of how Stanford handled it, and then if there's a money restriction, does that mean that we have to give up some potential, official national patent for certain countries that might eventually bite us back?
Good question, and I do feel sorry for the PIs who have to pay for patents. So we run a very big office, and so I'm going to tell you some big numbers. The budget for staff and space, just running the office, not counting patent expenses, is close to $10 million a year. And we spend about $10 million a year on patent expenses. So we do take on that burden for the faculty members. That is a large amount of money. Because we're such an inventive university, we keep getting lots and lots of inventions. So we also have to watch that because we don't file non-US applications that easily. I would say we often talk to Spark about this because they would like us to file much more broadly, and yet we can't afford to file in all these non-US countries. So again, the strategy is usually to file in the US first because we're supposed to, and then when it's time to do national phase, we'll file PCT. You don't have to designate countries yet. You have a little bit more time. And we try to find a licensee right from the beginning. We expect the startup or any company that takes an exclusive license to pay for the patents. I usually say we're not the bank. And so if a company is interested in taking a license, they will have an obligation to pay back the patent expenses. So I don't think your VCs should be surprised that they will have to pay. They're probably surprised that the faculty have to pay. That is not generally the case in the US. So the US, generally the university takes on that burden. In the US, I think we feel that technology transfer is part of our public service mission. That is part of the good that the university can contribute to. And so we will take on that obligation to pay for patent expenses.
So, but for the PCT, we did that too. So we passed through the PCT already. PCT only have 18 months. And if you start right at the first day of the 18 month and negotiate with any VCs, usually it takes a long time, longer than 18 months to negotiate any deal. So what happens if, you're 18, also you have to, get ahead and prepare for filing the national phase way before that deadline too. So assuming that you have about a year, which is really limited time. So we had that too. And then, would the Stanford University continue to support for the national phase? We consider that's a valuable.
We would take the risk, but of course, as a big institution our budget in the university is about $4 billion, so we can take the risk. If we are pretty comfortable that it's likely to be licensed, even if this deal with the VC falls apart, if this is really a hot technology, it's likely that somebody else would be interested in it. So yes, we would take the risk. We would go further. But on PCT, we don't file all the countries. It's typically a country in Europe, probably Germany or Switzerland. depends on whether the market is in China or some other countries. We will, Japan, it depends again what the invention is and what it would cover. We are not going to get worldwide coverage at all the countries.
Right, that I understand that's impossible. But for drug, I think national phase for 8 to like 11 countries are pretty common, including EUs and some promising Asian country. You can't really just skip that. So that's still a great amount of money.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the nice presentation. I have a question. What kind of rule does the Stanford University use to evaluate the potential product or the patent when you want to license to either the existing company or the startup company? What's the rule you use to evaluate your potential product or the patent?
So we don't have a rule. It's a little bit of a gut reaction. Our people are very experienced with technology. We make a lot of decisions and we don't necessarily feel that we always are right. In fact, of all the disclosures, we probably license 25 to 30% of them. So we've spent a lot of money on other disclosures which never go anywhere. Of course, what we want to do is what is the technology in a market that would be licensable. Biotech for most universities are easier to license, those kinds of inventions, because the life sciences industry understands patents. If it's a semiconductor invention, it is very unlikely that a big company is going to take a license. They don't believe in this university has one patent. They trade piles of patents with each other. So when we're looking at a semiconductor invention, we're going to be very careful about deciding whether to file or not in that technology area. Obviously, almost all of our technologies are very early stage, and we're not going to make the right decision on all of them. So it's a little bit of a subjective gut reaction. Again, this part of the business is the hardest to train on. And what it is experience. It's seeing lots of inventions. We know that the people who start in our office, who are early in their career, really think all the inventions are great. And because they're really new and the faculty are excited. And then over time you get experience and you realize, well, some technologies just never get licensed. It was a poor investment. And then we get more experience as it goes along. I like inventions that are really different. And actually, I like them if they're simple. But again, there are lots of technologies in, let's say, cancer immunotherapy. That is the biggest area lately. And there's going to be lots and lots of inventions in that area. And it's an area so hot that probably we can't afford not to invest in that technology. So again, it's very much of an acquired skill. It's not a bunch of rules. Because if it were, then everybody would be rich and VCs would have that.
Yeah, because I think in Taiwan, the problem is that it's very difficult for people to evaluate a very creative or innovative potential product, right? So
yes, it's a challenge for everybody.
Yes.
All over the world.
Thank you.
I'm wondering, how do you make a decision to give up the patent, to terminate, and do not pay the maintenance fee anymore? That's the first question. And the second question is, how do you determine what type of IP to protect your knowledge? Trade secret, patent, or something others? Okay, thank you.
I'll answer the second question first. It's easy. We don't have trade secrets in the universities. You know that universities, people talk a lot, and they like to share. That's the whole point of university research. So we don't keep trade secrets. We either protect by patent or we protect sometimes by copyright. So technology transfer from the university to industry is the more formal way of transferring technology. There is a lot of know-how, and typically that comes with a consulting arrangement between the inventor and the company. What was the first question again? Oh, how do we terminate filings. Well, we've been trying to do a good job of not spending good money after bad money. So many times in the US, we have this provisional application system where we can file cheaper for a year. We'll market like crazy for the first year, and then we have to decide whether to convert to a utility or file a utility patent application. Often we will, but we're more careful at that stage because some things we've marketed and have gotten no interest at all. But let's say we decide to file a patent application. Then in the US, we have maintenance fees, not as often as in non-US countries. But then we'll keep a patent for a while as long as we think that it still has potential. We go over all the cases with everybody once a year, and we talk about how much money they spent on a particular invention and what is the likelihood of finding a licensee. As many of us know who do technology transfer, the inventions usually come in, I call it a B. You don't know whether it's going to do really well or it's going to fail. So it comes in as a B, but over time, it goes one way or the other. It either gets better, moves to an A maybe, or gets worse and moves to a C. And over time, we have to make that evaluation every year. So I see from the sign that my time's up, and so I thank you very much for listening.